Prescription products require completion of an online medication consultation with an independent healthcare provider through the LifeMD platform and are only available if prescribed. Subscription required. Individual results may vary. Additional restrictions apply at lifemd.com. Read all warnings before using GLP-1s. Side effects may include a risk of thyroid C-cell tumors. Do not use GLP-1s if you or your family have a history of thyroid cancer.
If you've struggled for years to lose weight and have given up hope, did you know you can now access GLP-1 prescription medications through LifeMD? LifeMD is now offering eligible patients online access to GLP-1s, the breakthrough prescription medication that can help you lose body fat and weight. Listen to what people are saying.
I've been able to live my normal lifestyle, and I've lost 20 pounds already. It changed my life.
I wasn't expecting it to shut off the food noise. This was life-altering, and if I can do it, I feel like anybody can do it.
And here's the best part. Your insurance may cover 100% of the cost of your medication. So go to trylifemd.com to have your eligibility checked right now. Get started today at trylifemd.com. That's trylifemd.com.
Morning people wake up for peace and quiet. McDonald's breakfast people, we wake up for the sweet rush of getting that warm, delicious breakfast right before it ends.
Crush your morning goals with a steak, egg, and cheese bagel or any breakfast sandwich and snag another one for just $1 with the buy one, get one deal. Only in the McDonald's app. Limited time only at participating McDonald's. Valid once per day. Must opt into rewards.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
The Deconstructionist podcast is produced by Nicholas Rowe at the National Audio Preservation Society Recording Studio in Newark, Ohio.
Follow us on social media at www.thedeconstructionist.com, on Facebook at Deconstructionist Podcast, Twitter at DeconstructCast, and Instagram at Deconstructionist Podcast.
If listening to this podcast has benefited you in any way, please consider making a donation. The donate link is in the show notes, or you can visit our website and click the donate tab. All right. Welcome to the Deconstructionist podcast. My little Matthew McConaughey right there. I'm your host, Adam Narlock.
And I am John Williamson, and this is Christmas treat number 2.
This is going to be one of those ones that fans of Rob Bell and people that follow Pete Rollins also will be very familiar with this little Christmas nugget. But I think you're going to get your minds blown wide open.
Yeah, this is a little different route. So last week we had N.T. Wright, a little bit more of the traditional Orthodox Anglican bishop kind of route. This week we're going to take in the other direction, and this guy's going to give you a little unorthodox, non-traditional approach to Christianity in general. We kind of covered a gamut of topics. So
yeah, we did.
Wasn't necessarily based on Jesus, although we did have him riff on that a little bit at the end.
We did say this was going to be Barry Taylor on Jesus for Christmas. And we did talk a lot about Jesus. But
yeah,
listening to Barry Taylor talk, the guy should just charge money.
Yeah.
To let people listen to him just talk.
Oh, the accent alone. Again, this is probably part of the top 5 accents we've had.
Oh my gosh, man. And his stories and his insights. This guy is absolutely monumentally brilliant.
Yeah. And his upbringing, or his start into Christianity, into becoming a theology professor, because he teaches classes occasionally at Fuller Seminary.
He's unreal.
The dude started on a tour bus because he was a roadie back in the 70s for Bay City Rollers and AC/DC.
Yeah. Oh, his stories. This is when we get to do, it's great. I love getting people like, N.T. Wright, and, we had Rob Bell on. We've had lots of brilliant authors and thinkers, but, honestly, it's these lesser known types that we usually get more feedback on because people are like, what the heck?
Yeah.
This is going to be one of those times.
Oh, for sure.
Because I remember doing this, however many weeks ago, and us both just looking at each other going, What?
Whoa.
So fasten your seatbelts, guys. We're not going to do a long intro for this one. Barry Taylor is just Barry Taylor, and look him up. And what do you got about him, anyways?
Just back in the 70s, like I said, he was he converted to Christianity on the Highway to Hell tour.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
Ironic, maybe a little.
So great.
But and then he ended up getting his PhD in pop culture and theology. Like I said, he currently teaches classes. He speaks all over the world. He's written a book, and he's working on another one right now, some memoirs. Just super, super cool, and really touches on philosophy and stuff like that, but combines it in a weird way like Kierkegaard and Bob Dylan, and has a big church out in L.A. He was originally ordained as an Episcopalian priest, and then started his own church, and gets all sorts of eclectic people. And
Sunday service? Is that what it's called? Sunday service?
I think so, yeah. And he does really bizarre, kind of like avant-garde church services. And we were just talking about this before we recorded. He looks like Roger Daltrey from The Who.
He looks like a British rocker for sure.
And he plays guitar.
And he does.
At his church, yeah.
Man, this is
cool.
This is a good one. This is those kind of off the beaten path perspectives that I really love bringing to the table in this podcast.
He was fun.
Yeah.
Let's let him have it.
Here we go. There's really not much more we can say.
No.
Just let BT speak for himself. So here we go, guys, with Barry freaking Taylor.
Barry Taylor, thank you so much. You're the one and only. We've been waiting to have you on. This is like Christmas for us, and it's in December, so that works.
Yeah, it's Christmas all year round when you're talking to me, apparently.
That's true. Absolutely, man. This is going to be a gift to everybody that hears it.
So one of the things that we like to do at the start, especially if the guest is first time on our show, is kind of start out with a little background on our guest, and yours is particularly interesting in your kind of path from your youth, I guess you could say, to becoming a theologian. So I wonder if you could kind of start there and just tell us a little bit about how you were raised, if it was particularly religious, and how you got into the work that you're currently doing.
Okay. Yes. Well, as you can tell, I'm not American. My mother now thinks I'm Australian because I've lived here too long. But I'm actually English, and I grew up in a decidedly non-religious environment. Really, not necessarily antagonistic against religion. Just religion didn't factor at all. Nobody really in my family, apart from my grandmother, had any kind of religious affiliation or association or interest including me. But, England has a different kind of approach to religion than the US. So there's not the whole deal of separation of church and state, and part of education involves religious education. So I was exposed to information about Christianity, and at school we used to have religious services every week, but it was something that you just accepted as part of the fabric of life, but didn't really pay any attention to it. What I did have, though, was a sort of lifelong interest in questions that do wind up in the realm, really, of the theological or the religious, issues and questions about life, meaning, ultimacy, all of that kind of stuff. And I was always curious and attempting to work out what I thought about those, but it didn't occur to me until much later in life that religion might have something to say about that. And so, so my sort of formative years were, if I had any religion at all, it was music, and that's where I sort of encountered any sense of transcendence was in music, not in religion or anything like that. So I didn't think about God or transcendence in terms of religion or anything like that. But I did have a deep love of music and its effect on me, which I think is interesting later, because I think in some ways that both contributed to and problematized issues around transcendence for me and how you think about that. But anyway.
Yeah.
So, but because of my love of music, I sort of wound up essentially involving my life in music, and I got involved in the music business. I was in bands, and stuff like that. But I was also I did technical roadie work and stuff, and so I started touring around, working with a lot of bands, and then eventually I wound up working with AC/DC. And it's while I was working with AC/DC that the turn towards religion began for me. I think you frame it different ways at different periods in life, because you only have the language available to you at a time to express it. So when I look back on it now, I think that it was the start of something, not necessarily maybe that's good enough. It's the start of something.
Sure.
And that start was really predicated on the fact that I was really trying to work out how and in what way I could become and be what I thought was a better, richer human being.
Yeah.
And part of that was because, on one level, the stories that you hear sort of about, sex and drugs and rock and roll it can be very stereotypical, and it usually is told in tales of excess. And of course, all those things to some degree are true, and there is a lot of sex and drugs in rock and roll, and there's a lot of excess, but it's also happening with ordinary people like everybody else, who have to work out how those things make them feel, or what they think about those things personally. And for whatever reason, I just found after a while that I was a little troubled inside by the kind of person that I was becoming. And it wasn't really the externals. I mean, to be honest, I took quite a lot of drugs and I indulged in a lot of things, but I wasn't so much worried about that. That I actually thought was a manageable component of my life. The thing that was really starting to bother me was the internal thing. I just had this sense that, to be honest, I was becoming a bit of an asshole. And so, the tangent, but somebody asked me a couple of years ago what my one leadership value is, and I said, well, every day I try to be less of an asshole than I was yesterday. So I'm still working on that one.
That's a good one.
But in terms of, because the interesting thing about rock and roll is, or being on the road with a band and stuff is, you show up on everybody's favorite night of the year. Basically, you show up to throw a party for people who've been waiting for this experience, and sort of all bets are off. And it's very easy. It's very easy to get what you want from people, and people are willing to give it. It's not. I think I don't know why. I just didn't like how I was becoming. So I decided that I really needed to find, and I wasn't even thinking about it in terms of changing my life, particularly in terms of vocation or any of that kind of stuff. I just wanted to feel better about myself as a human being. So I went back, and I'd always been reading, but I started to dig a little bit deeper, and I sort of turned back to one of my first interests, which was philosophy. And I sort of took note, perhaps for the first time seriously, that a lot of philosophy really in some ways engaged with either with critique or rejection of religion.
Absolutely.
And so I just found myself asking myself, well, what do I think about religion? You know, there's almost a tangent, like, you know, well, I guess maybe I've never given that any thought, so I'll start to give it some thought. And I'm one of those people that when I get on a jag, I sort of go down the rabbit hole fully.
Mm-hmm.
So I just started to kind of read really expansively, essentially just to get a handle on what I thought about a subject that I'd really given little credit to. And, you know, so I just bought a bunch of religious books and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't even with a thought to embracing anything. It was just to, like, work out what I thought. But the more I read, the more I thought, well, maybe there's something in religion that I actually need in terms of this whole notion of becoming a better human being. But then I didn't know what that might be or where to find it, you know. So I looked through all the usual kind of religious stuff, and I sort of waited, really, to be honest, I waited till the end to get anywhere near like Christianity, because I figured I knew that.
Yeah.
B, my only reference point was my grandmother, and I figured, you know, if I'm on the road with a rock and roll band, anything my granny's doing can't be that cool. So, you know, and I just presumed that because I'd had like religious education that I really understood what Christianity was about. But eventually, I actually bought a Bible. You know, I'm on the road with a band, and I bought a lot of different books about religion and, you know, holy books or whatever. And so I went out and I bought a Bible, and I just kind of went through it systematically. And because I'm like that, and, you know, I thought it was, to be honest, I thought it was kind of insane.
It is insane.
Because, you know, you remember. Yeah, it is. You know, you remember things that you're told, you know, it's all about Jesus and all that stuff. And then you read the Old Testament and you go, wow, there's some angry stuff going on here. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but, and there's a little component that I'll come back to. That's another a little catalyst. But anyway, I went through the Bible from cover to cover. And it was when I got into the Gospels that I was sort of, I can't say arrested, but I was quite taken with the person, the Jesus that I sort of met in the gospel stories, which seemed to stand a little bit in direct contrast to my experience of that in religious classes and notions that I had about, you know, that kind of wet, soppy Jesus, you know, who like pets babies and
he's got like feathered, flowing hair.
Yeah, you know, like the only long-haired person that grown-ups like. And but what really struck me was the human aspect, and that's really where I got taken. Was by this sort of idea of, I mean, it was much more naive then, you know, it's like decades ago. So there are layers and layers of theological reflection on top of it now, you know, but essentially I just was really taken by the sort of raw and open humanness that I found there. You know what I mean? And sometimes when I go back and read those stories, I'm surprised that I found so much there.
Yeah.
But at the time, there was this kind of visceral humanity that kind of spoke to me in a particular way. And it was like, yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking for. And it wasn't anything particular. It wasn't like an otherworldliness. It was actually, and it was sort of predicated on, I was really sort of struck by the way in which Jesus seemed to respond differently to situations and circumstances than the other human beings around, particularly if it involved somebody's brokenness or shame or pain or their need for protection. And that really took me. And so essentially, to cut to the chase, after a little while, I just decided that I was going to try and model my life on a few things that I picked up in the stories personally. And I sort of made that my personal code to live by, which essentially was to kind of be less judging, less manipulative, more generous and kind-hearted towards people that I encountered. I mean, it was really that. It was that sort of naive and primal, but it was also quite transformative.
Right.
And it happened. And it happened really. It happened independently of any association. I hadn't been near a church. The only thing I left out of that story is that what actually led me in the end to the Bible was I met this girl in Texas at a concert, one of those stories, and she happened to be in a Christian cult. And
somebody call Steve Hassan.
I don't want to say too much about it because I have a book coming out next year. No, but
perfect.
Actually, I do. I don't mind saying about it. But it was one of those encounters that really took me by surprise, because this girl wanted to pray with me before we had sex, and it was the first time as an adult anybody had ever sort of wanted to pray for me, and I didn't know where to put it. And I mean, the prayer. Sorry, that was a joke. We got it. Oh, good. I'm glad. It took a second between here and Columbus, I think. But anyway,
that's great.
So that was like, so that's what really sort of pushed me towards really thinking about it, because and that's a very abbreviated thing. That's a big story in and of itself. But something in that encounter just sort of pushed me towards rethinking what I thought about Jesus and a whole bunch of things. So anyway, that's kind of where I started. And I did that for, I don't know, just a year and a half, a couple of years, before I ever came into contact with a formal sort of church or anything like that. And that happened when I moved to California and spent some time here with some friends, and they happened to go to church. And to some degree, it kind of all went a bit wrong there for a while, because I was sort of told that everything that I'd garnered from my experiences was pretty much all wrong, and I had it all wrong, and I needed to reshape and reframe my life in a particular direction, which was, now I look back on it, it was just formalizing a religious experience, through the lens of Christianity, as many people have done. And so I did that, but to some degree, my theological journey since then has essentially really been about the undoing of those things and the rediscovery of what it was that drew me there in the first place, which was this encounter really with a very sort of materialist interpretation of Jesus and consequently Christianity and Christian religion in general. And it was questions about those things that sort of led me to theological education, and then sort of exploration, and then teaching, which is sort of what I do now, amongst a few other things. So, and in some ways, I'm still asking the same questions that I was asking way back then.
Well, that's beautiful. Wow. That's great. I mean, asking the same questions. I feel like our show is all about that. I mean, it's like, myself, John, so many people we've had on, there's like this common theme of like, I thought this, and then I learned this, and now I'm undoing a lot of that, or deconstructing it, or whatever, and now I'm asking the same questions, but I'm a different person now. And so the same questions need to keep being asked, because we change.
Absolutely. And the tragedy to me is that somehow that was lost as a sort of option in modern Christianity. The assumption was you kind of got it all sorted out,
right? And
you knew the whole plan, and you just went with it from here on out. And that's and that still seems to work for some people, but it doesn't for most people. And the opportunity, I find that a lot of people find themselves kind of adrift because rather than being a place where theological reformation or reinvention or recapitulation goes on, there's no place for it, because much of modern Western Christianity is settled on a particular ideological construct that doesn't have room for the ways in which people change. And
man, that's good. That's good.
And the ways in which questions need to be asked. When you live in a religion of answers, it's very difficult to have your questions heard. And when everybody's running around telling you that they know how the world works, you're essentially supposed to embrace the answers that are given, and they're meant to settle those questions. And I think, to be honest, that the question of what it means to be human is a question that only gets refined when it's asked over and over again and lived out again and again and again, and you come to the end of one thing and need to move towards another, So
dude,
that's what comes into that.
That is so good. That is awesome. We want to talk about some of the stuff you're hitting on with, that human aspect of Jesus, that humanistic, materialistic. We want to touch on some of that, but could you just give us a little taste, give our listeners a little taste of some of your theological framework right now? Just a little smidge, just a taste.
In what way do you mean that? Like where I'm coming from?
Yeah, kind of where are you coming from? I know you're, obviously involved in, radical theology, and, you're friends with our friend Pete Rollins, and, I've heard you with Jack Caputo, and I've heard you with Tripp Fuller, and, that's going to be new to a lot of our listeners, maybe not all of them, but just maybe share a couple things that you think, are kind of some things that you're kind of working out right now, or some things you're interested in from your perspective.
Yeah, so I think, the main thing that I've been working on where I differ, say for instance from Pete, is that one of the big lenses for me has always been culture.
Oh.
So I've always sort of been involved, both personally and then with broad interest in culture, both in terms of structure of culture and society. So whether it's technology or ideology and things like that, but then also the artifacts of culture, like art and music and fashion and stuff like that. So a lot of my theological work has kind of been at the intersections of like theology, faith, religion, and culture, and how that plays out. So because my interest really is both personally and in terms of the larger sort of questions of how and in what ways the worlds in which we find ourselves impact the way we think about the sacred, the divine, about God, about religion, about belief, and about faith. So that my trajectory has been along that pathway, and I start when I wound up getting involved in the church. I think I sort of started where most people did. In fact, Pete and I have very similar backgrounds. We were both in sort of quasi-charismatic, independent church environments, where there's a whole lot of action going on for a while, but eventually you kind of see behind the curtain and you move on and you move through stuff. And so I would say, so for me, I guess it's like probably about every 6 or 7 years, there's usually some event that either occurs or that I cause, sometimes healthfully, sometimes unhealthfully, that brings about a sort of shift in the framework and the grid that I work from. So I've basically been processing through Christianity, and like you probably, and as you said, most of your listeners, come to the end of a lot of religious encounters in terms of how I thought they were working for me. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
and then
absolutely.
asking the question, and then sort of asking the question, well, is there anything next? What, where now? What now? What should I, what do I think now? How do I think now? And that sort of led me really back to, it's funny, some of the things so my interest in philosophy has never abated, and it's always been a part of the fabric of my theological work.
Sure.
So, in fact, Pete and I met because he was the only person I'd ever met that was reading Zizek. So he was the first person I could talk to about, and we were both reading the same book, and it was on the basis of that we sort of started up our friendship, through those, deconstructionist philosophers, Derrida and stuff like that. But I'm more of an Italian philosopher. Pete's big on the Frenchies. He likes, Derrida and Lacan and stuff like that. I'm more of a Vattimo, Umberto Eco semiotician kind of guy. So, but anyway, so really where I'm kind of at today is I'm sort of working out and working through, and in some degrees with Pete, really, in a kind of collaborative way, really sort of thinking through a different kind of approach to theology. And personally, I'm sort of working out what I'm calling a radical theology of culture.
Okay.
And but really sort of thinking about how and in what ways you find your way to a meaningful relationship with yourself, with the world, with religion, with theology and stuff through the lens of radical theology, but I'm not really like, I'm a bit like, Jack talks about, after the death of God theology. I think I'm kind of one of those people as well. So, I've done a lot of kind of deconstruction. You're the deconstructionist, so I've done an awful lot of deconstruction, but deconstruction, not destruction. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And I think there's a very big difference. And I've always said that, Derrida is always pushing you sort of forward to what's to come. It's deconstruction is about breaking through, not just breaking down. So I've done a lot of that kind of stuff, just pushing theological horizons, and kind of where I'm at is I'm a sort of fairly materialist and immanent view of religion and Christianity at the moment.
Excellent.
And so I think a lot of it for me is a lot of it has to do with inversions. So, for instance, it's interesting how you read something and then you read it again, and so one of the initial turning points back in the day when I told you that I was reading about Jesus and really valuing the sort of humanity that I found there was there was the story in the book of Luke of the woman who comes to wash Jesus' feet when he's in the house of the Pharisees, and it was a line in that story that made me decide to choose a particular pathway with Jesus. It was one line, and it wasn't even a theological line. It was a sort of acting direction. There's that moment where the woman's washed Jesus' feet with her tears, and the Pharisee says to himself, well, this guy's obviously not a prophet, because if he was, he'd know who it is that's touching him, because she's a prostitute or sinner. I think he's a sinner. And then Jesus asks the Pharisee a question about debt. And then there's this line, and it says, looking at the woman, he said to the Pharisee. And I read that line, and the drama of it, so he's looking at the woman, so she's unavoidable, because all eyes in the room go where he's talking. And he says, do you see this woman? And And essentially, the Pharisee couldn't see the woman because he was blinded by the label that he placed upon her. He didn't see a woman; he saw a sinner.
Wow.
And that was the line that got me. So I find that there are these catalysts that happen. So part of the way that I got to sort of a more radical view of theology was really quite simple. And funnily enough, in the Bible, which a lot of times I think people think that I don't read it, and that, Pete doesn't read it either, but I think we do really, but on the down low, But I was really struck by like Paul's conversion, and Paul's or Saul's conversion. I always loved that painting by Caravaggio, of the conversion of St. Paul. And the Catholics always put a horse in because they're not literalists, and the Protestant painters don't. But in the story, Paul gets knocked off his horse, and he's blinded for 3 days. And nobody ever talks about the blindness that precedes conversion. Nobody ever talks about the fact that you have to go dark before you can find light. And so I sort of took that as a kind of theological metaphor and began to explore the role that the underbelly, the reverse side, that the dark plays in our sort of journeys and stuff like that. So it's just these small shifts in the way I was sort of thinking and reading and approaching how I was looking at religion, at theology, at church, at belief, and all that stuff, and trying to find, well, not actually trying to find room, making room for things that were previously either frowned upon or overlooked in terms of their potential. So whether it was, Pete talks a lot about the role that doubt plays, and I've done quite a lot of sort of stuff around those things too. But the kind of the negatives that we don't make room for, that actually become rich sources of theological reflection, but they take you in different directions.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
They give you like I remember that there was this Nick Cave, the songwriter.
Yeah.
So Nick Cave did this lecture for the BBC, and he referenced a sketch that Rembrandt made of Jesus on the cross between the two thieves, and Nick Cave was actually giving a lecture on love songs, and he said you should never trust a love that hasn't breathed the air of both good and evil. And he used that drawing as a reference and basically said that the interesting thing about Jesus is the air that he breathed wasn't pure. It was the impure air of life, that it was the air that inhaled and exhaled both good and evil. And I think sometimes, for me, the role of radical theology is this entry not out of life but into life.
Absolutely.
And for me, my lifelong trajectory, which goes back to these questions that I've been holding, and the reason that radical theology, at least at the moment, or at least the interpretations that I have within that framework, are working for me, is because my theological trajectory has always been to get deeper into life, not to get out of it. And one of the struggles that I had for a long time with Christianity was its constant fascination with anything but life.
Absolutely.
How to get out of life, what to think about the afterlife, or I know that it's very broad and very broad stroke, but essentially an escapist form of religion.
Totally.
This is how you get out. This is how you get out of the trouble that we're in. And for me, radical theology takes a different trajectory, and it follows, if you like, it doesn't want to stay on the mountain. It wants to come down the mountain where life is.
Yes.
So that's kind of where. So I'm very vague on I'm very vague on the otherworldly aspects. So my principal lens is immanent rather than transcendent. And as I said earlier, my experiences of transcendence were experienced very early on through music and the arts, and they became problematic for me when they were given a kind of framework around a being, God. That was always a bit of a struggle for me. That notion of this transcendent being, God, who knows all, sees all, and is all powerful. I struggle with that I don't deny transcendence, but the transcendent a little bit more problematic.
I'm right there with
me.
you.
And I don't think much about I don't think much about things like the afterlife. I'm with Simon Critchley on that. I believe in the afterlife. I believe in the life that comes after me, and I want to make life a good space for those who come after. So that's the best I can do with the afterlife. It's just not really my interest. It's not that I don't think radical theology can't speak to those things, and I think there are people that are beginning to sort of do that. But for me, my take on it is that radical theology really is more a sort of critique of the idols that Christianity is devoted to. Maybe, authoritarianism, literalism, maybe, I don't know, love of capitalism. I grew up left wing. What do you want? But I live in LA. I live in LA, and I live in LA, and I like things. So I'm a hypocrite, but that's all right. I don't know if that makes any sense. If that was even the question you wanted me to answer, but
absolutely, that was great. That was brilliant.
The rapture happened, we missed our chance of heaven. If the rapture happened, we should just dance together. If the rapture happened, we missed our chance of heaven.
So since this episode is coming out in December, especially around the holidays, we'd be remiss if we didn't touch on the big JC. So
yeah.
So
we kind of are.
Yeah. So through kind of the lens of radical theology and kind of your perspective, what role does Jesus play, and what makes him so captivating that it survived the ages and spurred on the largest religion on the planet, essentially?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess you'd get a lot of different answers, but for me, it's I have to say that obviously in my own personal experience or my own personal encounter, it was the human aspect of Jesus that really struck me, and I realize that for many people that they therefore assume I just think Jesus is some great, moral teacher. Although I don't think Christianity and morals are one and the same, actually. So, but we can come back there later. But I think that what's interesting about Jesus to me, and what remains interesting, are the very challenging notions that are thrown out there. So. Unconditional love.
Yeah.
Which, if you like, negates all the attachments that we feel are necessary basis for society. So if you think about it, when when Jesus tells you, you know, you got to hate your mother and father, it's getting at something that really rattles the nerves of how we form and shape society. Do you know what I mean? Or when he says, you know, love your enemies. Well, yeah, but you know, safety is found when you know who your friends are and who your enemies are.
Yeah,
it's one of the sort of basic. It's a sort of basic, you know, social development skill is to treat your enemies different from your friends, because at least you know where the danger's lurking. You know, and so for me, there remains something about Jesus that I think really challenges the way we frame our existence, and you know, fairly early on, I think I was kind of taken with this sort of idea of you know, this sort of crucified Jesus who basically is abandoned and maybe then is an icon of powerlessness rather than power.
Yeah.
And then the question, but not, you know, it's all, we can all go, oh yeah, Jesus is an icon of powerlessness, and then we can sort of try and utilize that as a kind of power animal. Do you know what I mean? But really to sort of then think through the ripple effects of what those what the implications of stuff like that is. You know, this is coming out at Christmas. Have you ever heard that Jackson Browne song, The Rebel Jesus?
Oh my gosh, yes, I have, but it's been a while.
Yeah, you know, so again, I think the other interesting thing is that, and I think sometimes this is, the importance of this is lost on a lot of church people who feel that they own Jesus.
Yes.
Or that they want to own Jesus, is that Jesus seems to remain a figure of currency within culture's ongoing struggle to understand itself, usually divorced from the religions that try and hold Jesus in a particular way, because those particular ways eventually run out of steam. And so Jesus generally gets reinterpreted most healthfully, I think, from outside those who lay claim on him.
Yeah, I've been beginning to see that myself.
So in terms of Christmas, I guess where I would lay that is maybe in that idea of the wise men who come. You know, so in a sense, that they're naming something about Jesus that can only be named maybe from the outside. And to some degree, I think, you know, John Caputo talks about radical theology being, you know, is the haunting of confessional theology. It's not outside; it's lurking in the hallways, haunting it. And I feel very much that we kind of need that right now. That we need some ghosts to sort of rattle their chains and haunt the hallways of confessional Christianity and throw out some different perspectives on how to think about this.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, Jack does an incredible job of drawing that out. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this because it sounded like you were saying it, but it'd be fun to have a little conversation about it here. One of the things that I'm a pastor at my church. I'm a volunteer pastor, and then doing this podcast, I love to just talk to as many people as I can about their perspectives and hear lots of ideas. Yeah. One of the things that just keeps coming up that I've realized, and you were kind of talking about it when we were talking about Christianity as escapism and as this like lust for transcendence.
Yeah.
And that really takes you completely out of the world, and it takes you somewhere else, what's that old hymn, in the sweet by and by, we'll meet on those beautiful
Sure.
shores and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And what I really see, and I'm drawing out of what you're saying, is that our inability to grasp whatever divinity we may be able to grasp at all, our inability to get that is because of our total neglect of humanity. And like you said, Jesus was the human one. That was his title for himself, the Son of Man, the human one.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand. I mean, it's not, I mean, this is obviously a debate that's been going on in Christianity for a couple of millennia in terms of how to understand, the whole questions of divine nature and, the various heresies and non-heresies perceived around how we interpret Jesus as both human and divine and all of those kind of things. I just think that we've come through that we're in a period where the transcendent is problematic as a given. The transcendent as a given is problematic, both for people outside of religion and increasingly for a lot of people inside religion. And I think that is something that we really need to spend a bit more time thinking through and thinking about. Have you read Charles Taylor's book, A Secular Age?
I've only read James Smith's summary.
Everybody says that. Why doesn't somebody read the bloody book first?
Because it's enormous. That's why.
No shit. Yeah. No, it is. It is enormous, and I understand, and it's intimidating.
I will read it eventually. It's definitely on my list.
Yeah, because he actually tackles in there a fairly in a really good way that sort of challenge, because he talks about us, living in an immanent frame rather than a transcendent thing, and the consequences that go along with that, and I think the sort of metaphysics around transcendence and all that kind of stuff are issues that a lot of people need to find some new language for.
Yeah, totally agree.
And I think, to be honest, that from my take on it, I think that Jesus and the Kingdom of God is, in some sense, a pronouncement of the end of that kind of metaphysic and that particular kind of transcendent view of the sacred, at least in the way that it's often crafted today. And because I think the trajectory, again, as I said, is that the angle is into the earth. And so for me, it's the becoming of an alternative community that's far more important than individual connection to some perceived idea of a transcendent God who exists in the sky, if you like.
Oh man, that was good stuff, man.
If we're gonna,
Merry Christmas, everybody.
If we're gonna shoot the breeze, if we're gonna talk lighthearted things, we might as well just talk lighthearted things.
Yeah, let's just go Charles Taylor, Secular Age, Transcendence, and Eminence. Let's do Edmund Husserl while we're at it.
And that's not to say, and I don't mean to, obviously there are lots of nuanced ways of reading that. Jeffrey Robbins has written this new book on radical theology, and he talks a lot actually about sort of ontotheology and re-looking at that within the horizon of radical theology. So I'm not saying that you can't experience transcendence or have a transcendent view. I just think we need to look at how we're how we're talking about these things, and whether or not within the framework of existence that we live, the way we're talking about those things is as helpful or as meaningful as we hope it would be. And my instinct is it's not, which is why so many people are having trouble with the religion that for many is particularly in America that they sort of grew up with, that no longer seems to be working for them, and they're not quite sure what to do about that. And I think we sort of have to dig down. You know, a lot of people change the form. You know, everybody's up for, like, you know, bringing in some smoke machines or, you know, having a few dramatic this, that, or the other. But when it comes down to, like, really reframing theological concepts, deconstructing ideologies, addressing or inverting and creating spaces where we give room for doubt, fear, you know, anxiety, and not with the idea that they'll be cured necessarily, but they'll just be embraced and understood.
Yep.
You know, those are the things that for me, at this Christmas time, are really important.
I think
it's only 80 here. It's only 80 in Los Angeles today, so it's starting to feel like Christmas even as we speak.
We're gonna have to find one of our friends to Photoshop a picture of Barry Taylor with a Santa hat on for when we release this.
Oh, I think I can probably find you one.
It's okay. Don't tell Pete, but we made a Halloween Pete picture, so yeah. Pete is Dracula, so I'm really quite fond of it.
We'll send it to you if you promise not to show him.
Yeah.
I'll get a T-shirt made.
Perfect. Although Jay Baker did make us promise to never talk to Pete again, so I guess we're already breaking our promises.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's just jealous.
Exactly.
It's hard.
I love Jay.
Oh man, you guys are all such a blast. I think one of the best things about John and I starting this show is this huge. It's like you just said, the Christmas present you were talking about. There's this huge community out there ready not to judge you, not to rush you along, not to try to cure your doubts, but to just embrace you, listen to you, and invite you into the conversation. And you do an incredible job at that, Barry. Everything you're doing, and at Sunday service. And if John and I can get out to LA, can scrape some money together to get out to LA, we'd love to get out there and just hang out with you guys a little bit, go to Sunday service, and do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, has Pete ever told you about our secret philosophical society?
Yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, I can't tell you about it because it's a secret.
It's a secret. You know. Right. The first rule of the secret philosophical society is you can't talk about it.
I'd have to kill if I told you. If I told you, I'd have to kill you. You know, it's like Fight Club, only one step further.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's wrap up here. Do you have any final thoughts? Any more nuggets, any more juice you want to leave our listeners with this Christmas season around Jesus and radical theology, or eminence, or materialism, humanism, anything like that?
That's a good one. What would I want to say? There's so many things to say. I mean, I think that it's Christmas, so I guess we should talk about the politics of love.
That's awesome.
I mean, so I guess for me, where I'm at the moment is that I read Christianity, I read Jesus through an understanding of the crucifixion that is an invitation maybe to something other than the general preoccupation with individual salvation that it's become a totem for.
Yeah.
And I see it more as a symbol and an iconic signpost to the chance to become an alternative community that rattles the powers that be, both in the church and out of the church, and stands, as John Caputo said, practicing a sacred anarchy. So for me, Christianity, I think, I'll close with this. In 1976, in England, I was actually on tour with AC/DC, and when I left to go on tour, all my friends were listening to like the Eagles and people like that. And when I came back, they were all punks, and almost overnight, the landscape of British youth culture changed and was impacted by the very vital punk music scene that emerged. And I think that within the horizon of popular music, punk was a moral cleansing agent. It challenged, it haunted the corridors of establishment rock and roll, and it ghosted them with a memory of what it used to be. It was radical in that sense. And I think that for me, radical theology has an element of that same kick down the door, three chords and the truth, primal attempt at saying, we can preoccupy with ideological constructs, or we can become something other, a community of people or communities of people where we celebrate and accept without judgment, and also without intent to shift or change. Human beings in the full glory of their humanity, in their humanity, in their nakedness and shame, as well as giftedness and strength. And if that's not what punk is, I don't know what is. And on my bedroom wall, I have a quote from Joe Strummer that says, "Punk rock means exemplary manners to your fellow human beings." And to me, that's Christianity in a nutshell.
Oh, man.
Barry freaking Taylor.
Wow. Now I have to go find punk rock to put with this episode. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
That's good.
It's hard enough to get permission to use any other kind of music, so.
Well, it's punk, so don't get permission. It's punk.
That's a good point. If they sued me, that would be counterindicative of their whole message. So
Yeah, you're being a hypocrite.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're being inconsistent.
Oh my gosh. This has been an insane pleasure, and I think an absolute gift to our listeners. They're going to love this.
Oh my gosh.
Before we let you go, though, you mentioned you have a book coming out next year. Are you allowed to hint at what it might be about or when it might be coming out?
Yes, I'm not sure exactly when it's coming out, but it's a theological memoir,
Killer.
and I think it's going to be called Sex, God, and Rock and Roll.
Oh, that's awesome. So
We'll have to do another episode when it comes out, man.
But yeah, so it's it could be interesting. It's not a memoir; it's a theological memoir. So it's about the triumphs and the tragedies of a theological life.
Oh,
man,
brilliant!
Sign me up.
What is the best place for our listeners to go to keep on top of what you're up to, and also obviously to be alerted in terms of when that book's coming out?
Well, actually, I do most of my work on Instagram.
That's awesome.
I mean, I have blogs and all that kind of stuff, but my Instagram is UK Bloke.
I'm following you right now.
So you can pretty much discover a lot about me from there. You'll find my shoe fetish.
That's great.
And so many other things. So, and there, there's always links on there to other stuff. So actually, to be honest, that's the place where you're going to find out most about me if you want to find anything.
You just picked up two new followers.
Yep.
Woohoo!
Oh, man.
That's great.
Well, thank you again so much. This has been an absolute pleasure for us, and we can't wait to have you back on to talk about some more medical theology.
That was so great. Thank you so much. Nice to talk to you both.
Merry
And of
Christmas,
course-
Barry Taylor.
Merry Christmas. Or Happy Christmas, as we say in England.
There you go.
God save the Queen.
Thanks for hanging
He
with
ain't
us
no
today,
human
man.
being. Bye.
All right, well, you heard it here first, folks. Jesus is the original punk.
I envision it with a blue mohawk, personally.
You know, if he was alive right now, no, he wouldn't have a blue mohawk.
No. Well, maybe.
No.
He'd be hanging out in the streets, the mean streets.
He absolutely would, and I think this is a perspective that it's been coming up a lot for me in my reading. Whether I've been going back through, I just realized that I never read all of Jesus Wants to Save Christians. Like when it came out, for some reason, I just never finished it. So
That's a good one.
I know, so I pulled it off my shelf, and I'm almost done with it now. And holy crap, it's really good. And it's all about the abuse of power. And N.T. Wright's new book is about the abuse of power. And, you know, like when we were talking with David Kapp, there just seems to be a lot of how Jesus and Christianity critiques power that abuses and oppresses and marginalizes and excludes people. So Jesus as the original punk, you know, as a Christmas reflection, honestly, right now, what an unbelievable reflection. Just think how weird it is that this King of the universe, baby in a manger, I mean, all of this pop culture stuff swirling around us from Charlie Brown to, you know, whatever else, to think just how backwards and weird and strange the whole thing actually is, because it's a critique of everything you would expect.
Yeah, this whole anti-empire thing,
Yeah.
you know, that began in the Old Testament and pervaded the New Testament and was preached by Jesus, who was this anti-oppressive system guy, and who's, you know, who would totally be a punk rocker now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that was really cool perspective by Barry Taylor, and like really unconventional. I didn't really know what to expect.
Me either. I'd heard him speak. I'd heard him do other podcasts when that Morgan Freeman documentary miniseries, Story of God, was on. Him and Trip Fuller did like a little, like, where they riff about it, like after every episode, little podcast, and I listened to that and I enjoyed it. And when he was on Rob Bell on the podcast, on the Robcast, I really enjoyed that. So I've never heard him kind of say the same thing the same way twice.
Yeah.
So I knew having him on was going to be this treat where we were just going to get all this new material, and he did not disappoint.
Yeah, crushed it, man. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that, and it's always fun for us to mix it up a little bit. So we kind of intentionally sandwiched him in between two guys who could not be more different, I think.
Yeah, we can't give away next week's treat.
No. We just recorded the intro and outro for that one, and
Goodness.
believe me, Merry Christmas to you.
Holy Moses.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, that's gonna be.
That's right. You heard it here first. We got Moses.
Yeah, freaking Moses.
Oh man,
good stuff, man.
Yeah,
this is fun.
So
Christmas with Barry Taylor.
Oh my gosh. And so as you guys heard us talking about in the episode, I did not get punk music, although I wanted to. But I got a really cool band out of Nashville that are starting to blow up. And they're actually, the lead singer is a friend of ours, AJ Babcock, who used to be in a band called House of Heroes. Like, still kind of is, I guess. They're kind of not super active, but
right.
This is his new band called Secret Club. And they have some really cool tunes that sound kind of like a cross between like White Stripes or whatever that Jack White band is, the one he did after that. I always forget
also.
But kind of like a cross between that. There's definitely some punk influence and some cool old school rock and roll vibes going on. So hope you guys enjoy that. As always, please, if you like the music that we play, definitely go tweet out, message, whatever. Let these artists know that you heard it here, and go buy their music, and let us know if you guys know any other bands that might want to get some free airtime.
We love it.
That's how I find music to play on this show. So
hope your holiday season is going well. Hopefully your deconstruction is going well. Hopefully your perspective's widening and your bias is getting confronted and you're getting to put your thinking cap on and not just read and hear exactly what you expect all the time. I think this episode in particular is going to be very, very good for that. So hopefully that's going well and you're doing it in community. And thanks for always tuning in and listening to us do what we do here. We love that you guys are a part of this. If you're listening, thank you for supporting us, whether if it's just by listening or by sharing it or by donating or whatever. Always feels like a great big hug to us who often feel like we're pretty secluded down here in my dark basement.
But yeah, seriously, thank you guys for everything. We love the great feedback we get every week. And as always, just to remind you guys, to give you guys a heads up, we will be taking a month off in January, beginning of the year. We'll be back some point in February. But in the meanwhile, we're going to get some much needed rest and start cooking up ideas for next year. But continue to check out our social media. We'll still be active on there and hopefully at some point next year do like a little get together and see what other treats we have in store. So
should be good stuff.
Yeah.
We love you guys. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and keep deconstructing. We are your hosts. I'm Adam Narlock.
And I'm John Williamson.
Grace and peace.
Maybe I'm lost. Maybe I'm cold out in the cold. Maybe I want to be all alone, but I'm not mad anymore. I'm not mad anymore. I'm not mad anymore. I'm just lost. Whoever it is that sees me in the mirror, he's not the same without you here. I'm not mad anymore. I'm not mad anymore. I'm not mad anymore. I'm just lost.